Okay, so I will call to order this meeting of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Finance and Administration Committee of September 1st. And could I have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Rennie?
Here.
Thank you. Director Miller?
Here.
Committee Member Oberg?
Here.
Thank you. And I'm just checking real quickly to see if others have joined us. Not yet. So we are missing Committee Vice Chair Elahi and Committee Member Gibbons for this meeting.
But let the record show we do have a quorum and we can get started.
Correct. Yes.
All right. So first on our agenda is public comment on matters that are not on the agenda. Do any of the attendees wish to speak on that item? Doesn't look like it. So I will close the public comment and move on to consent calendar. We have one item on the consent calendar, which is minutes from the August 5th Finance and Administration Committee meeting. Do I have any desired changes or comments on the minutes from members of our committee?
No comments from me.
Okay, good. All right, then I would like to ask for a motion to pass the consent calendar.
I'll move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion by Maria, and I'll go ahead and second it while Howard's figuring out what he's doing over there. And feel free to raise your hand in your virtual hand in the panelist window. I'm watching that, and I don't see anybody wishing to make any more comments. Does any member of the public wish to comment on consent calendar? Don't see any hands going up, so I'll close the public comment for consent calendar and ask for a roll call vote.
Thank you. Committee Chair Rennie?
Yes.
Miller?
Aye.
Oberg?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries with Director Gibbons and Elahi absent.
Okay, so with that, we'll move on to item number 2 in our regular calendar, and that's the CEO's update, which is a discussion item, and I will turn it over to the CEO.
Hi, Chair Rennie and members of the Finance Committee. I'm open to any questions, and I don't have anything specific for the CEO report that's not included in the packet.
Okay. Are there any questions from members of the committee on items that are in their packet? I don't know, I can't speak today, for item number 2, the CEO's update. I don't see any hands going up. Would any attendees wish to comment? Members of the public attendees wish to comment on this item? I don't see any hands going up. I'll close public discussion portion for item number 2. Any other comments from committee members? Not seeing any hands going up. So this is a discussion item. I assume we don't need a motion. So I will close item number 2 and move on to item number 3, which is the long-term power prepay agreement update. And this is a discussion item also.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Rennie, and Andrea, if you would put up a presentation. So I'll be making this presentation. I also have our financial advisor, Michael Berwanger, on the call to help us out and help the committee out with any questions you may have. We also have staff available to address any questions. So next slide, please. So actually go back to the cover slide, sorry. So the essence of the presentation is to authorize the CEO to enter into agreements to finalize the power prepayment program that will then be presented for submittal to the SVCE board. At the SVCE board meeting last week, we went through this presentation, so I believe you're prepped for this. And we've also talked to the Finance Committee and the Exec Committee in the past about this. This is one of the very few areas where SVCE can get a structural cost advantage in our power purchasing program. And the idea here is to provide authority to me to take necessary steps to get ready. So that's the essence. And now I'm going to get into some of the details of the program structure, et cetera, to give you more background on that. So if you can go to the next slide. So essentially we have two transacting parties. There's a prepay buyer and a prepay supplier. And the process by which we work it is the prepay supplier. So we will assign our contracts to the prepay supplier. Municipal bonds will be issued by a conduit. And right now we are looking at East Bay, Marin, Monterey, and us being the founding members of this conduit. The work in creating that conduit is underway right now. It costs us $15,000 that I've authorized already. The prepay supplier will then pay the contract price to the PPA seller. So the PPA seller whose contract we are assigning stays whole, and then the LSE, that is us, will pay the prepay supplier the discounted rate, which basically incorporates the value of this transaction. And the value of the transaction comes in from this last bullet, which is the prepay supplier is utilizing and holding the capital that we have issued from these bonds through this taxable versus tax-exempt arbitrage. So that's the essence of the deal structure and why we're doing it, the different parties. There are a lot of details to get this right. So we'll go through some of that right now. So let's go to the next slide. So this is a pictorial representation of what I just told you in the previous slide. On the right top box, that's SVCE, and you will see that the arrow that goes to the left from the SVCE box is the contract price of contracts we already have with PPA suppliers. We will be paying that contract price minus a discount. And in return, we get megawatt hours and RECs. So that's the business thing for us. We'll get the contract price less the discount. Everything to the left, the bottom of it, what needs to be done for us to get this contract price minus the discount. So we have the municipal conduit I talked to you about that would issue non-recourse tax-exempt bonds, which means it's non-recourse to SVCE. It doesn't show up on our balance sheet, and the bonds are rated, the rating agencies are rating the conduit. We have the prepay supplier from the previous slide, which is essentially the bank supplier. So this is the deal structure. So when I talk about the different professionals that we need to get ready for this deal, it's all the different pieces that would make up the structure. We need professionals to create the transacting documents and also several other steps that need to be taken before we can bring a final deal in front of the board for approval. Okay, next slide. The next two slides are a repeat of what you've seen last month and prior. So I'm not going to go through all the bullet points because I've already talked about that even today. But a couple of things. The discount is expected to be 8 to 12%. There would be bonds. This program would be a 30-year program. And we would save approximately $3 million a year. That translates in about half to 0.75% of a rate discount. If the deal is unable to move forward, say after the initial period of the deal is expected to be 5 to 7 years, and then we'll be remarketing the bonds. If you're unable to remarket the bonds, or if there are other kind of risks that occur that the deal is unable to move forward for a further period of time, what happens is we just go back to status quo. We're no worse off than where we were when we started. The discount goes away. Next slide, please. So the timing and cost. So timing of actually bringing the deal to you for consummation is going to be dependent on interest rates and the delta between tax exempt and taxable interest rates. At our board meeting last week, we did show you this table, which I have in the appendix over here, which shows about 11 deals that were done in California between 2006 and 2019. And they are what we call episodic in the sense that the interest rates, the delta has to be at a particular increment before we can actually consummate. So that's why we want to get ready. The costs come down to this. The majority of the costs are contingent and will be paid through bond proceeds at the closing. We estimate the cost is going to be somewhere between $1 million to $1.5 million. And the majority, vast majority of those costs are going to be paid at closing. For some of the contracts, we are asking for both a fixed fee and a contingent fee. So we can, if we decide we want to pay a fixed fee versus a contingent fee, we can do that. But essentially, all these costs will be paid at closing. Next slide. So there are two things we are looking at. One is the bond conduit formation itself, which I told you is 4 CCAs looking at it. And the second is the documentation and transaction terms. Right, so that's what is going to be the majority of the effort and money is going to be spent over there. So let me talk a little bit more about the second block, the documented transaction terms and the kinds of professionals that we would need to hire and the agreements we'll need to enter into. Next slide, please. So these are the agreements. The kinds of agreements are going to be, for example, bond, tax, issuers, disclosure counsel, municipal financial advisor. So there's a lot. And then we'll probably have our own financial advisor take a look at it because the magnitude of the deal that we are contemplating with East Bay Clean Energy is going to be somewhere between $350 million to $800 million. So even though that's only 10% of our power purchase, we're figuring that the bonds would pay for 10% over a period of 30 years. So the notional value is quite high. Next slide. In terms of the status of where we are with hiring these professionals, so it's the same list I showed you on the previous slide. So this provides a little bit more in terms of what the role is and who we've selected. So East Bay and us put out an RFP and we interviewed several counsel, and here's who we have hired. And so, or we've selected, I should say. We haven't actually signed the agreements with them yet. So we're in the process of negotiating the agreements, and that's part of what I'm requesting your authority or the board's authority in October to sign these agreements. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of fiscal impact of this recommendation, there is no negative fiscal impact at this point to SVCE. At some point, we will be paying this money to the professionals, but those are expected to come in predominantly or nearly 100% out of the bond proceeds. And net, the savings to us are quite a bit. So if you think of the total cost here between $1 million to $1.5 million, we are estimating that we would strike this deal only when benefits are going to be around $3 million a year. And the first period, we expect it to be running 5 to 7 years. So we're thinking somewhere between $15 to $21 million worth of savings is just from the first period savings that we're looking at. Okay, so then I want to talk to you about the timeline, which is the next slide. So what's in gray is kind of the last gray box is where we are today. It's the second thing of the Finance Committee. And based on your questions and your recommendation today, our thinking is we would take it to the entire board at the October 14th meeting to get authorization to get ready. And then we just continue the conduit for the JPA, the conduit JPA. When that's ready, I'll bring that to the board. And then the documentation and transaction terms, we're working on it each week. We have a conference call on that. with East Bay's Community Energy, and we'll bring you the transaction as soon as it's ready in terms of the interest rates at the right point. So my next slide is the last slide, and it is the request that I have of the Finance Committee. It's to recommend that you, Finance Committee, recommend that the SVCE board authorize me to enter into agreements necessary to carry out the task to finalize the prepay transaction that will be brought to the board. And I have a sub-bullet about again, it's most of the money is going to be paid for at consummation. So that is the end of my presentation. Open for questions.
Girish, let me start off. This is the first time I saw it or I registered it. The law firm of Oric, my stepbrother is a partner there. What effect does that have on my ability to make comments? I realize our counsel's not here with us, but what's your opinion?
Yeah, my sense is you should go ahead and make comments at this point. It's, yeah.
Okay.
And yeah.
All right, so looks like Howard has his hand up. We'll start with Howard for questions or.
Yeah, it's a quick question and then my generic comment, but on the slide where you had the arrow that went around the nation dashed line,
Mm-hmm.
What we're really doing is we're really just assigning our PPA contracts to the conduit.
Actually, we are assigning it to the bank supplier.
Oh, okay. It was just kind of weird because there's a dotted line between us, but it really moves our ownership essentially to somebody else, and it's the bank.
Correct. So that's
Yeah.
the prepay supplier.
Right.
And in terms of operations, nothing will change. We will continue scheduling the same units, but we will have the prepay supplier essentially be on a CC list. So they will be copied on all operational details that we undertake on this.
I appreciate the slide because it's simpler than previous versions we've seen. I just think that dashed line is a little bit weird, just because it is the bank supplier. And then this is an operational question. So if the whole thing goes south, I get the steady state when it reverts back to us. What happens in the middle? And here's my nightmare scenario, right? The guy, you know, for whatever reason, the bank supplier doesn't pay. Then the PPA might withhold. And then we wouldn't have our energy. Or what happens if we've paid our discount, but the bank supplier doesn't pay, and then they go out of business? Who's responsible for that last payment to the PPA?
So I'll give you an initial answer, but I'm going to ask Mike Bowanger to answer. So typically these deals have a reserve, and these are 3 months of estimated costs that gets through these kinds of shocks. So as you unwind a deal, you need some way of managing it. So that's my initial answer, but Mike would answer.
Yeah, I think so. A couple of things that are important, Howard. One, the novation or assignment, whatever word you choose, is a partial assignment. So the entire rights in your contract are not given over to the bank counterparty. We're really just putting in the rights that are associated with the molecules and the dollars, right? So everything else, so all of those things that you negotiated in your rights against the developer remain with you. So there's protection there. And then from a dollars and a cents and an energy perspective, the window to take these down is very, very small. So you really just have a month, effectively, really just you know, a couple of days to a couple of weeks. And as Girish said, there's a small reserve that will be established that will cover the gaps. And then contractually, the reason that you have so many attorneys is, you know, we need to look for the pinholes that you identified and make sure that they don't exist.
So with that extra reserve, it means that there should be money to flow so that our power keeps flowing. And I guess, you know, it's a detail that I don't know how ever works out, but, you know, not that I love lawyers or hate lawyers, but they sure can be pains in the ass when you don't need them to be. And so I'm just wondering, is it possible that this, 5 years into this, that it wraps around the axle between the bank and the PPA in such a way that we don't get our power, but we don't get our rights back because they're still in some sort of contract dispute that's unresolved?
Well, never say never, I guess,
Never
right?
have.
But I think, that is our goal, right? Our job is to try to wrap it as tightly as possible. And I think I think what you would be out sitting here today, what I would tell you is there's a tiny gap that's going to be filled by the reserves. And if it's all papered the way that we expect it to be, that contract should always come back to you. And at worst comes to worst, you do retain all of the rights within the contract for underperformance, non-performance, and all that other stuff. So I think, it's never fully given to the bank. So even if the worst thing happens with the bank and they fall away, I think you still have everything else in the contract.
Yeah, the worst thing
And
with
then
it is they become a non-performing zombie that's tying this up in court. If they go away, it's clean. If they stay and perform, it's clean. There's that weird intermediate zone in the middle. As long as we don't get stuck there,
well,
I guess it's impossible to know, but I appreciate that others are thinking in more detail than me about that.
Sure. Well, the one thing I would highlight, you're going to have a lot of company here, and everybody's singularly motivated the same way in that you're going to have creditors, bondholders of, $800 million worth of debt, where when the cash flows stop going around for some reason, as you just highlighted, they're also going to be particularly interested in making sure that default provisions are enforced properly. And within that embedded are your rights and remedies as well. So everything, they're not going to let this go and get tied up for years. And, it was a natural gas transaction, not a power PPA transaction, but you did have a bank go bankrupt on one of these. And it played out exactly as you would have hoped within the timeline that was expected. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up at this time. Let's go to the public and see if they have any comments. Do any members of our attendee list wish to comment on this item? I don't see any, so we'll close the public comment portion and come back to our committee members for more questions and comments. Again, this is it's not an action item, just a discussion.
This is Maria. I have a quick question, just out of curiosity. So you said you'd issue $350 million, and then I think I heard it could go up to $800 million. Would you issue them all at once or in tranches?
Yeah, I think, and obviously Garish can correct me if I go wrong here, but there's a pretty big range as we're still evaluating it.
Right.
Some of that accounts for, we're planning to have 2 of you participate, East Bay and Silicon Valley, and maybe it's smaller if only 1 of you do, so that type of thing. But yes, to answer the question, there's the issuance would be done all at once.
Yep.
So all of the bonds would be sold on the same day and be sold for the same term as it's currently outlined.
Right. And would you do variable rate bonds? Because I know you talked about remarketing, but I would assume that if it's remarketed in 5 to 7 years, it's not really variable, it's a call.
Yeah. So we're talking 7-year, 5 to 7 year mandatory fixed rate put bonds. Yep. That then have to be remarketed at that time. Right. In a perfect world, and the way people used to do this back 20 years ago when we first started doing these,
days were easy.
The relationship between taxable and tax exempt rates were such that it allowed you to do fixed rate bonds for 30 years. And if we could do that, I think that's what we would do. You lock it in, you set it and forget it. Here, the way the market dynamic works out is that you have to, in order to achieve the savings that you want, you have to do a 5 to 7 year bond, and then you have to remarket it in the future. And at that point, if the market's there, you could fix it out to term, or you do different terms.
Right, but you're leaving yourself that option. That's what I wanted, because for that much money, you want to have the flexibility you can build into it. So good. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Howard, you have your hand up.
Yeah, mine's not a question. Mine's just the comment, which is, you know, these things are super complicated. And so it really behooves us to do a very thorough job in getting ready. So I'm all in support of moving forward with the getting ready. And then I don't know what year it's going to be. Rates are kind of stuck on zero right now, but hopefully the world will loosen up a little bit and we'll have an opportunity to make some money here. I'm not sure how fast that'll happen, but again, I just think we need to do a really thorough job of getting ready because I don't want, any unforeseen loopholes or landmines sitting out there. So I'm all positive.
And I would agree with Howard also, moving ahead, way ahead and having all our ducks in a row. We've been listening, been getting updates on this for more than a year now. And so I've gotten comfortable with the idea, and I'm more and more comfortable that staff also understands it because they've been studying it for more than a year, that we won't be stepping into something that we don't know what we're doing. It's completely the opposite. I think, Girish and others have a good handle on what this is now. It's clearly going to be good for us, especially as our what we're contributing to reserves each year is getting smaller and smaller. This 3 million extra year becomes a significant padding to keeping us keeping us in the black, or allowing us to continue our programs, or maybe add to our programs, or continue to make sure that we can give a discount to PG&E. So I definitely think it's worthwhile. I guess there's now a question whether, when it comes to the board, I will be able to vote on this item or not, depending on how you structure the question. But I feel comfortable with what we're doing from that standpoint. I'll also, in terms of the presentation, I thought your diagram, that the structural diagram you had was a good way to explain it at a board meeting and so forth. Usually in our committee meetings, we give some input on how you're presenting it, and I thought that was a good way to explain it, because we've been talking about this for quite a while, and we started off not quite understanding what it is, and I think that was a good diagram to kind of put it all together. Howard, you still have your hand up. I assume you didn't take it down. No more comments, right?
Yeah, sorry, on this iPad, it's like hidden away, so I forgot to lower it. Sorry.
So I will close item 3. It looks like we're done with our discussion.
So if I may just add, just summarize, when we bring it to the board, we'd say that we had support from the members present to the Finance Committee to move this forward. And just given, the complexity of the future deal, I'm going to bring this in an open session, not in consent.
Okay. Okay, makes sense. Yep, we're in agreement with that.
Yeah.
So, okay, then we'll go ahead and close item number 3 and move on to item number 4, which is an action item to approve a recommendation for the health savings account benefit option. And I'll turn it over to staff.
Okay, I believe that Kevin is going to handle this, but maybe I will add a comment or two here. So essentially, one of the things that the board has been very supportive of is making sure that we are flexible and responsive, both to market conditions and what our employee needs are. It was almost a year and a half, 2 years ago, when we realized that this health savings account, which we're going to present to you today, is a request that a few employees may benefit from if we adopt this. Last year, we just didn't have enough bandwidth to bring this in because we were doing the HRA and changing the FSA. So we had a lot going on there. So we've taken some time in the last several months to figure out a way in which we can offer this cost neutral benefit that will be taken advantage most likely by a handful of employees at most. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin to go over this presentation for the board.
Thank you, Girish, and thank you for that framing of the topic. Thank you, Chair Rennie and members of the committee. So yes, we'll be talking today about adding a benefit option, this health savings account. So Andrea, could you advance to the next slide, please? So as Girish, laid out in his overview, we currently have a robust set of benefits here at SVCE, including, payment of health premiums monthly, our health reimbursement accounts, HRAs, flexible spending accounts, which we can use for a health portion, parking, transportation, and dependent care options, depending on employee preference. But as Girish mentioned, going back a couple years, even before my time here, the health savings account's been discussed as a possibility. And so, over these past few months, we've looked at this, and we think we've come up with a way to offer the health savings account option to those employees who are interested. Employees could keep their current plans or elect to move towards this combination of a high deductible health plan and health savings account if that's something that they wanted to choose. Next slide, please. So just very briefly at a high level, a health savings account is essentially like a qualified retirement plan account where you can add dollars, have them build up over time in a tax advantaged account, and then use that money, but instead of for retirement funding, you use it for qualified health expenses. Very similar to a health reimbursement account or a health flexible spending account, but in this case with that advantage of investment and tax deferred growth. The key though is that you cannot have an HRA or health FSA and a health savings account at the same time. So it's a bit of a choice. An employee would need to select, again, that combination of high deductible health plan and health savings account instead of their current offerings. Next slide, please. So this really just sums up that transition. Currently our employees can choose from a variety of health plan options through CalChoice, our marketplace provider. SVCE makes contributions to the HRA and to the FSA and those 4 buckets. The changes are that with an HSA or a health savings account plan, they would need to select a high deductible health plan, but that would still happen through the marketplace at CalChoice. They would then, contribute to an SVCE, could contribute to a health savings account instead of those HRA and health FSA options. But the other 3 flexible spending account buckets would still be available, and contributions could still be made to those for parking, transportation, and or dependent care. So next slide, please. We've done a bit of our sort of outreach and research to see, what the interest is. There have been employees who have been interested in this in a while. One employee currently has one. And then recently we had a staff presentation and had 15 staff attend, which, while a small number, is a good chunk of our SVC full-time employees. We had 8 of them complete an exit survey, and of those 5 indicated potential interest, a lot of which depends on, some of the details, which we'll discuss in just a moment. Now, as Girish mentioned, in this last benefits go around, we did some changes in our plan administration, but the good thing is that this year, to move forward with this HSA option, we would keep things just as they are, and CalChoice would again continue to offer the plans, and IGO, who is our flexible spending account administrator and HRA administrator, would be able to administer an HSA plan as well. So next slide, please. So this moves on to this idea of cost neutrality. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the sort of current finances and how that compares to a possible HSA option. So right now, if you take into account both monthly premiums and HRA contributions, SVC can contribute up to a maximum of $1,500 per month per employee. That of course, counts HRA contributions, which aren't fully, utilized every year. And so, looking at actual cost expenditures, we're looking at closer to about $900 per employee per month. The thing is, though, that these high deductible health plans, in part because they have high deductibles, have lower premiums. So there's potentially a few $100 difference in that premium contribution monthly. And then just quickly to note, because FSA contributions would remain constant, we're kind of leaving that out of this cost analysis since they net out. So could we go to the next slide, please? And I'll show you a quick table. So keeping that maximum column in mind on the far left, which really represents that $1,500 maximum. The middle column represents those actual costs based on what we've seen employees actually using and spending on a monthly basis. And then the far right column is sort of our best guess and analysis on what a combination of potential high deductible health plan premium, and then what is left over, really this potential health savings account contribution amount. So when we're looking at that high deductible health plan premium of around $500, we're looking at up to about $400 in potential HSA contributions from SVCE, while maintaining neutrality with the current $900 per month expenditures. Next slide, please. So based on that, we'd like to propose that $400 be used as sort of a starting point, but with a caveat, and that is that, much like qualified retirement plans, health saving accounts have an IRS limit each year. Now that limit is, approximately $3,600 for individuals, and 2 times that, or $7,100 for families. So that would cap any amount that we'd be able to contribute on an employee's behalf. So taking that into account, our proposal would be, again, to maintain this cost neutrality, limiting monthly contributions for individuals to $296, which reaches that $3,550 annual limit, and then a $400 per month contribution for families, which then maintains that cost neutrality we defined in the table previously. Next slide, please. So moving forward from there, again, we're here today to sort of seek your recommendation to move forward to the board of directors, to hopefully recommend that they approve this addition to our benefit options for employees. And then in the coming months, throughout the end of 2020, we would begin the employee engagement and sort of rollout of this plan to various employee and staff members. Our open enrollment period happens in January, at which point employees could, take a look at the option and select it if it's what they want. And then that would go into place with the start of our new benefits year at the beginning of February next year. So that's what I have for you right now. I'd be happy to take questions on any aspects of this proposal.
I'll start off. Let me ask the first question. So we can only contribute $3,500 per year to the HSA fund. How much can employees contribute?
My understanding is that $3,500 is the limit, so that would be where it tops out overall.
So we would do all the contributing basically, unless they took family, and then there would be some room for them to contribute.
Correct. There would be headroom up to that $7,100 maximum. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I recall. I did it many years ago. I recall room for me to contribute. Let's see, Howard, you have your hand up. Questions?
Oh, it's just the follow on to your question, Rob. I knew exactly what you're going to ask.
Okay.
So the over 55s get the $1,000 catch up. So does that mean for over 55, how to phrase it? Our limit is our limit. That's how much we're going to do, the 35, 50. If somebody was over 55 and they wanted to do the catch up, that extra $1,000 would be allowed by the IRS, but that's on them, right?
They could contribute additionally up to that. That's true.
Yeah. Okay. I was just thinking our limit, we set it at the under 55, but those who are older and those guys, it's on them, just like Rob had experienced in the past. I'm excited about these options. I think the younger, healthier staff members will be way behooved to go down this route, because I think they can amass a lot of money, and it's a useful thing in retirement. It's useful if something really bad goes on. So I'm hopeful we're moving forward.
And we expect that it's going to be a long education campaign. I mean, this first bite at the apple really was to introduce the concept of the health savings account, just so that people understood what it was. But we're going to definitely roll out with our benefits broker and providers a series of tools to help them really assess in their own particular situation what makes sense for them. So.
All right, I don't see any other hands at the moment. Let me go to the public and see if any member of the public wishes to speak on this item. I'm not seeing any hands raised in the attendees.
I'm sorry, Chair Rennie. This is Maria. I can't raise my hand.
Okay.
I think I'm one of the panel speakers.
Yes.
So I just wanted to echo Committee Member Miller's comments that, you know, options are good. I'm all in favor. And since this is an addition to, and especially with the younger crew in your group coming in, I think this is an excellent addition to the choices you have for your benefits.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't see anybody raise their hand from the public, so I'll officially close the public comment on this and come back to Committee Member Miller.
I was just going to make the motion that we approve. I guess we're not approving it. We are approving to recommend to the board that they approve this option.
Okay, so I will second that. Girish, you had a comment on our?
Yeah, just a sure, small thing. I'm planning on putting this on consent calendar, given the dollar impact and the fewer employees that we have who would take advantage of this. Thank you.
And honestly, Grish, I think a lot of, at least the elected officials I run, they're familiar with this already. And it's like we're just filling in the last of the few holes, the little cracks in our benefits plan. And just the big picture for me is I'm just appreciative that we continue to figure out better ways to serve our employees. So this is all positive.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see where you can find a negative in this. It's not costing us anything extra. You know, more options are always good. Howard said you could amass a lot of money. I thought that was going to be the case when I had it, but I was always doing a lot of sports and ended up always spending it on physical therapy or something, or going to the skin doctor more often, but that also gives you a little more easier option on how you want to spend it also. I'm currently in an HMO where you got to go to the doctor every time you want to do anything, and you know, she won't send me to the skin doctor. She pulls out the liquid nitrogen herself to burn the stuff off my face. And so, you know, I think it is a good option, whether you save up more for the future or gives you more options on how you manage your own health. So with that, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Thank you. Chair Rennie,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
Oberg.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously with Elahi and Gibbons absent.
All right. So with that, we will close item number 4. And do we have any comments from the committee or staff?
Sure. Now that you're our chair, Rob, these are the shortest meetings ever.
Well done, Chair Rennie.
It's
Who was
because
that last year?
half the committee didn't want to show up and ask questions because I was chair. I don't know. Just luck, I think. I do like to move a meeting along if I can, though. Any other staff comments at this point? If not, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.